Wes Craven's New Nightmare is a 1994 meta-horror film. It stars Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp, John Saxon, among others, most playing themselves. Yep, as mentioned before, this film is very meta, so it as a result takes place in reality where a new Nightmare on Elm Street movie is in the works, which is one of the main things that attracts me to this movie the most. Anyway, let's get started. The premise of this movie centers on Heather Langenkamp, who is now a very familiar face in the City of Dreams, as talk of a possible new Nightmare on Elm Street movie is being discussed, with Heather being asked to play Nancy again. She doesn't immediately accept, though, and in fact, she's kind of hesitant due to not wanting to do so much horror on account of having a kid, along with the fact strange calls from a creepy caller pretending to be Freddy keep being made to her house. That is until her son, Dylan, played by Miko Hughes of Pet Sematary fame, starts exhibiting disturbing behavior that only grows worse, and Heather becomes plagued with terrifying nightmares that seem to be coming true. Then she is forced to reprise the role of Nancy and find out what is going on. When she realizes what is happening, she realizes that she's dealing with an ancient evil entity that has taken the form of Freddy Krueger. Wes Craven has kept this monster bound within the confining world of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but now that the series is done, the monster has escaped and is slowly entering reality. This is a pretty cool premise. You don't see too many horror films where it has a self-referential narrative like this one. Maybe Ghostwatch could count, but that didn't have as strong as a one as this. Now, as cool as it is a little bit slow in some areas, especially since it starts to feel like, okay, Wes, what is your point? Where are you going with all this? But once that is all answered, the film has a surprisingly adventurous feel to it, because Heather essentially has become a horror movie character again in order to stop this demon from taking over, while saving her son in the process. And giving her son, speaking of which, was also a good move, since it makes her feel more authentic as a character, and gives her character more layer, as well as by putting her in a motherly position, along with making her, character a lot more relatable. I give plot a B+. Really awesome concept, but it does admittedly drag in some areas. Next is acting, and it was pretty good. Heather Langenkamp, of course, was able to easily get into the role of Nancy when the time came, and she is very good in an emotional sense when it came to her son Dylan, because the genuine worry she shows and the determination to get him better is evident in her performance. Of course, Robert Englund is fucking fantastic as Freddy Krueger. He still is the same creepily charismatic psychopath from the previous films, just with the seriousness of the first movie, Times Infinity. But the best had to be that of Miko Hughes. I still like his performance in Pet Sematary better, but man was he good in this. Like, the way he switches between possibly being possessed by the entity taking Freddy's form to screaming and crying in immense fear is just flawless. This is a pretty big role for a kid, a role I probably would have been too scared to play if I was this age, especially considering that it is a character dealing with a lot of trauma. But Miko Hughes is one of the main reasons I kept watching, because his performance was so spectacular that it not only kept me invested in his character, but also more invested with the film, and wanting to see find out what was going on with him. I give acting an A-, fairly decent, but Miko Hughes and Langenkamp were especially good. Next is cinematography. I think the places the cinematography are strongest in this movie are the scenes taking place in the entity's lair. Some pretty neat wide-angle shots that reveal the dark, fiery fate awaiting anyone who entered it, and it also gave you a good idea of how massive the place was. Other than that, the cinematography, aside from making the dream sequences feel more otherworldly in the best possible way, was alright. I give cinematography a B+. It wasn't anything too special, but it did surprise me in some areas. Now, special effects in this movie were, for the most part, pretty good. Got a little cheesy when it got to the lair. Seriously, the CGI dragon at the end of Hellraiser looked more real. But other than that, they were fairly decent. I actually do like the effects in the original Elm Street better, but in this movie, I think they were strongest in the dream sequences. Like, it genuinely looked as though Dylan was being dragged above the freeway in that one scene. In that scene where Dylan is being pulled inside of a casket with Heather trying to save him, It got got the idea that these characters are being slowly dragged into another world across very well. Especially since the place Freddy was dragging Dylan to was made of the same fabric material found inside coffins, which is what Dylan was being pulled into. So it would make sense for it to be made of that, and thus made it easier to imagine this as being all real. I give special effects a B+. Fairly decent, but they were stronger in the first Elm Street. Finally, directing. Wes Craven was one of the strongest voices in the world of horror, and this film definitely shows why. The way he showed Heather slowly transforming into Nancy, as well as her transportation to the world of the Elm Street movies, was such a smooth transition. And the overall atmosphere of the film more than complemented the dream sequences, and added to the surreal feel that Wes was going with them. Although I do wish Freddy would have used the complexities of Dreamland against his victims a little more like he did in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. However, the cool meta premise and the satisfying way Wes had it play out more than makes up for it. I give directing a B+. Pretty good, but it was a little better in his other movies. Overall, Wes Craven's New Nightmare has a pretty neat and novel idea, especially for the time, but people might have mixed opinions on the pacing of the film. Some may be curious to see what is going on with all of the mysterious stuff surrounding Nancy, while others might just be waiting for the story to pick up a little. Because Freddy does not show up for quite a while, which may frustrate some viewers, but actually helped give time to truly build up to him. Although there were times when the film got all over the place. I mean, there's these random earthquakes that occur, which I think it's supposed to be Freddy slowly entering reality, but I'm not entirely sure. And it had me confused as to where it would all possibly go. Other than that, this film was pretty damn good. I give Wes Craven's New Nightmare a B+. Really good concept this film has going for it, and while it may drag in some areas, the performances, climax/rising action, and effects are still pretty good. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and sub for more content.